My son banished me to the roof terrace, but what I found in my husband's drawer made me fight back. I thought I would be safe living with him, but I was pushed into the corner of the house like a burden, until I discovered a letter, a will, and documents hidden by my late husband. That night I understood that no one was going to erase me, and I decided to turn the tables. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The alarm went off at 6 in the morning, as it had every day for more than a year. Mary Helen automatically extended her arm to the left side of the bed, finding only the cold pillow that still carried the impression of the head that had rested there for 40 years. The gesture repeated itself every morning, a muscle memory that her heart had not yet learned to forget. She got up slowly, her knees protesting against the weight of her 72 years and the loneliness that seemed to have settled in her bones. The three-bedroom house in Miami Beach, Florida, remained silent, with only the tick-tock of the living room clock echoing through corridors that were once filled with conversations, laughter, and Anthony's comforting presence. In the kitchen, she prepared coffee for 2 people, always for 2. She served herself in the blue porcelain cup she had received as a wedding gift and left the other cup in its usual place, as if expecting him to appear at any moment with that shy smile and sleep-tousled hair. The sugar melted slowly, while she observed the garden through the kitchen window. The roses she had planted with Anthony in their first year of marriage continued to bloom, stubborn in their beauty. She watered them every morning, pruned them carefully, and talked to them as if they were old friends who understood her language of silences and sighs. The garden was her refuge, the only place where she still felt completely herself. After coffee, she went to the room that served as Anthony's office. The shelves still held his accounting books, glasses on the desk, the pen he always left uncapped by mistake. Mary Helen had preserved everything exactly as he had left it, as if time could be suspended by the force of longing. She picked up his portrait on the desk and ran her fingers over the glass. 45 years of marriage, and she still discovered new things about the man who had loved her with the patience of someone who knew that true love is built day by day, gesture after gesture. Anthony had passed away in his sleep, peacefully, without pain, without goodbyes. A blessing, everyone said. For her, an absence that hurt like an open wound. The phone rang, cutting through her thoughts. It was David, her only son. "Hi, Mom, how are you?" Her son's voice always warmed her, even when it carried the rush that seemed to define his life in Chicago. David had become a successful lawyer, married to Frances, an ambitious architect whom Mary Helen was still trying to fully understand. "I'm fine, son, and you all?" "We're great. Actually, Mom, Frances and I were talking and, well, we want to make you a proposal." Mary Helen felt something tighten in her chest. In recent months, David had been calling more frequently, always asking about her health, her routine, if she was eating properly. Questions that could be affection, but that she was beginning to perceive as something more. What kind of proposal? "Look, Mom, you're alone in this big house. We're thinking of moving to Florida, and we thought it would be better for everyone if we came to live there with you. You'd have company, we'd take care of everything, and you could stay on the roof terrace. You know how big and airy it is? We could make a beautiful adaptation up there with all the privacy you need. The roof terrace, the place where she and Anthony used to drink wine in the late afternoons, watching the sunset paint the Florida sky in impossible colors. The place where he had proposed to her, where they celebrated each anniversary, where they built the plans that life allowed them to realize. I don't know, David. This house, Mom, please think about it carefully. You're 72 years old, you're alone, it's not safe. And we would be right there taking care of you, keeping you company. Frances already has some wonderful ideas to modernize the house, make it more functional." Modernize. The word echoed in her mind like a distant alarm. Did modernize mean erase? Did it mean forget? "Let me think about it, son." "Of course, Mom. But don't take too long, okay? We're anxious to be close to you." After hanging up, Mary Helen walked through the house as if seeing it for the first time. Each piece of furniture told a story. The armchair where Anthony read the newspaper on Sundays, the dining table where they had hosted friends for decades, the hallway mirror that had reflected so many moments of happiness. In the master bedroom, she opened the wardrobe and touched Anthony's clothes, which still carried his scent. She hadn't been able to part with anything, It was as if each object was a thread connecting her to him, and cutting these threads would mean losing him completely. The loneliness weighed heavily, that was true. There were nights when the silence of the house was so profound that she felt as if she were disappearing along with it. There were mornings when she woke up not knowing exactly why to continue. David's presence, the company, the care. Perhaps it was really what she needed, but something in her intuition whispered caution. Frances had always been polite but distant. Her glances evaluated the house as a professional evaluates a project, not as someone who understands that every brick there held memories. And David, her dear David, seemed increasingly influenced by his wife's opinions. In the afternoon, she called Christine, her friend of decades who lived in the apartment next door. "Chris, David wants to come live here with me." "That's good, Mary. You shouldn't be alone anyway." "They want to put me on the roof terrace." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "On the terrace? What do you mean?" "They say they'll adapt it, that I'll have privacy, but I don't understand why I need to leave my rooms for them to stay. Mary Helen, you need to think carefully about this. This house is yours. Your memories are there." "But I'm so lonely, Chris. There are days when I don't talk to anyone." "Loneliness can be solved in other ways, dear. Living together is a very serious thing. Are you sure this is what you want?" After the conversation, Mary Helen sat on the porch observing the garden she loved so much. The roses seemed more vibrant in the late afternoon, as if they knew they were being watched with affection. She thought of Anthony, what he would say about this decision. He had always been protective, but he also respected her autonomy. "Mary Helen," he would say, "you are stronger than you think. Trust your intuition." But now without him, her intuition seemed scrambled by loneliness and the desire to have family nearby. When David called again, a week later, she had already made her decision. "Mom, have you thought about our proposal?" "Yes, I have. You can come." "That's wonderful. Francis is already making the first sketches for the terrace. It's going to be beautiful, Mom. You'll see how good it will be to have us nearby." As she listened to her son's plans, Mary Helen looked at Anthony's photograph on the living room table. For a moment, she had the impression that he was watching her with a worried expression, as if he wanted to say something important that she couldn't hear. But David's animated voice pushed those thoughts away, replacing them with the hope that perhaps finally the house would come back to life. David and Francis arrived on a Saturday morning with a moving truck and an energy that seemed to instantly fill all the empty spaces in the house. Mary Helen welcomed them with a special breakfast using the good china she had saved for important occasions. "Wow, Mom, what a beautiful table." David hugged her with genuine affection, and for a moment she felt she had made the right decision. Frances smiled politely, but her eyes were already scanning the environment, as if mentally reorganizing each room. "Aunt Mary, the house is even more charming than I remembered," said Francis, using the affectionate term that had always sounded a bit forced to Mary Helen's ears. "It has so much potential. We're going to transform it into a real gem." In the first few days, the coexistence was harmonious. David helped his mother with small tasks, Francis cooked elaborate dishes, and the house once again had sounds of life. Mary Helen felt less alone, less lost in the silence that had consumed her since Anthony's departure. But the changes began subtly, almost imperceptibly. "Mom, these pieces of furniture are very old," Frances commented one afternoon, running her hand over the sideboard in the dining room. "And they take up a lot of space. How about if we donate some and buy more modern and functional pieces?" Mary Helen felt a tightness in her chest. That sideboard was the first piece of furniture she and Anthony had bought together when they were newlyweds and counting pennies. "But it's still in good condition." "Of course it is, Aunt, but you know how it is. The decor needs to keep up with the times. And with the terrace being adapted, you'll need fewer pieces of furniture anyway." The terrace. The work had begun in the second week, with workers who arrived early and filled the house with noise. Mary Helen tried to remain optimistic, imagining what it would be like to have her own space. But each hammer she heard sounded like a farewell. "Why don't you go up and see how it's coming along?" David suggested one day, noticing his mother's anxiety. Going up to the terrace, Mary Helen barely recognized the space. Walls had been erected, dividing the wide environment into smaller rooms. The view of the garden, which had always been panoramic, was now cut by a small window. "There will be a bedroom, small living room, compact kitchen, and bathroom," Frances explained enthusiastically. Everything very functional and modern. You'll have total privacy. And the space where Anthony and I... It will be preserved in one part, David hurried to answer. You can continue having your afternoon coffee there. But Mary Helen saw that the space of memories was being divided, fragmented, transformed into something completely different from what it had always been. The place where she had danced with Anthony on the night of their 50th wedding anniversary would now be a wall. Meanwhile, on the main floor, the transformations accelerated. The dining room sideboard was donated to a needy family, according to Francis. The lace curtains that Mary Helen had embroidered during her pregnancy with David were replaced by modern blinds. Old paintings disappeared from the walls, giving way to abstract prints that Francis had chosen. "Where is the portrait of my parents?" Mary Helen asked one morning, looking for the photograph that had always been on the mantelpiece. "Oh, that was a bit yellowed," Francis replied distractedly, organizing decorating magazines on the new coffee table. "I put it in a box in the basement. When you move to the terrace, you can take whatever you want." "You stored it without telling me." "Sorry, Aunt, I thought you'd like the surprise. The house is getting so much lighter, don't you think?" Lighter. To Mary Helen, the house was becoming empty of soul. The last straw came when she came down for breakfast and found the kitchen table replaced. The oval solid wood table, where the family had eaten breakfast for decades, where David had done his homework, where she and Anthony had planned all the house renovations, had been exchanged for a modern glass table. "Where is my table?" "We donated it yesterday," said David, without raising his eyes from the newspaper. "The new one is much more practical, Mom, easier to clean." "But you didn't ask me." "Mom, they're just furniture," David sighed, with a tone of impatience she didn't recognize. "You're getting too attached to material things. The important thing is that we're together." Mary Helen felt tears burning her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She went up to her room, which would soon no longer be hers, and locked herself in the bathroom to cry silently. That afternoon, Christine came to visit her. "Mary, are you okay? You look..." "I'm tired, that's all." "And how is the living arrangement going?" Mary Helen looked around as if someone might be listening. "They're changing everything, Chris. Everything. As if the things Anthony and I chose had no value. Have you talked to them about this? They say it's modernization, that it's for my own good." Christine observed the living room, noticing the radical changes. "Dear, this is your house. You don't have to accept changes you don't want, but they came to keep me company. I asked for this. Keeping company doesn't mean erasing your history." That night, during dinner, Mary Helen tried to address the subject. "David, son, I know you're both trying to improve the house, but..." "Mom, don't worry about that," he interrupted. "Francis has excellent taste. You'll see how beautiful it will look." "But some things have sentimental value to me." "Of course, and you can take everything to the terrace," said Francis. "By the way, it's almost ready. 2 more weeks and you can move." Move. The word echoed in Mary Helen's mind. She wasn't moving to a new space in her own house. She was being relocated. "And what if I don't want to move to the terrace?" The silence that followed was loaded with tension. David and Francis exchanged a look that Mary Helen caught but couldn't fully decipher. "Mum, we talked about this. The terrace will be perfect for you, independent but with our company always nearby. But why can't I stay in my room?" "Because..." Francis hesitated. "Because we need the space too, to work, receive clients. You understand, right?" That night, lying in the bed that would soon no longer be hers, Mary Helen looked at the ceiling where a water stain drew shapes that she and Anthony used to interpret on sleepless nights. "Looks like a rabbit," he would say. "Looks like a cloud," she would reply. Now the stain just looked like a stain, and Mary Helen began to understand that perhaps she herself was becoming just an obstacle to be removed from sight. The house she had built with love was being dismantled piece by piece, memory by memory, and she, who had always been the mistress of that home, now felt like a tolerated guest, waiting for the moment to be definitively relocated to the margins of her own life. The move to the terrace happened on a rainy March afternoon. Mary Helen watched as the movers carried her reduced belongings to the space that would now be her world. The double bed where she had slept for decades had been replaced by a single bed. "More suited to the space," Francis explained. The adapted terrace was functional, as promised, small but organized. The window offered only a fragment of the view that was once wide and generous. The place where she and Anthony had watched 1,000 sunsets now had a wall. "It's beautiful, isn't it, Mum?" David tried to sound enthusiastic. "You have your total privacy here." Privacy. The word had a bitter taste. Privacy was becoming synonymous with isolation. "I left an extra house key with you," said Mary Helen, showing the keys she had always carried. "Actually, Mum, we changed the lock," said Francis casually. "For security, you know. Crime is terrible. Now only we have the keys, but don't worry, you can ring the doorbell whenever you need to come in." Ring the doorbell. At her own house. Mary Helen felt something break inside her chest. In the following days, life organized itself into a new routine. Mary Helen woke up on the terrace, prepared her coffee in the compact kitchen, and went down to the garden. The only space she still felt was hers. But when she wanted to get something from the main house, she had to ring the doorbell. "It's just until you get used to it," David would say, always in a hurry, always with some important appointment. The exclusion became more evident when she discovered she hadn't been invited to an important dinner that David and Francis offered to clients. She found out about the event when she saw the preparations, the flowers, the table set with the good china that had been hers. "We thought it better for you not to participate," Francis explained. "It's very boring work stuff. You would have been bored." Mary Helen dined alone on the terrace, hearing the laughter and conversations coming from below. In her own house, she had become invisible. It was Christine who found her crying in the garden one Sunday morning. "Mary Helen, this cannot continue like this. They gave me a roof, food, care." "Gave you? This house is yours." "But I accepted the change. I wanted them to come." "Dear, one thing is them living with you. Another very different thing is you being pushed into a corner of your own house." Christine convinced her to see the lawyer who had handled the family's affairs for years. Dr. Robert received Mary Helen with his usual kindness, but his expression became serious when she told him the situation. "Mary Helen, are you sure you want me to investigate? Sometimes discovering certain things can be painful. I need to know if I'm exaggerating or if..." "You're not exaggerating. I'll check the legal status of the house and your assets." While waiting for the lawyer's return, Mary Helen began to observe David and Francis's movements more carefully. She noticed whispered conversations that stopped when she approached, calls made in a low tone, documents quickly put away when she entered the rooms. One afternoon, going down to get a book from the library, she heard voices coming from what had been Anthony's office. The door was ajar. "Has to be done soon," said a male voice she didn't recognize. "Elderly lady alone can be considered in a vulnerable situation." "But she's lucid," answered David, and there was hesitation in his voice. "It doesn't matter. At her age, a judge can consider that she no longer has the capacity to manage a property of this value," said Francis. "And with the medical reports we got..." "What reports?" David's voice sounded alarmed. "Relax, honey. Dr. Mitchell is our friend. He certified that she shows signs of mental confusion, forgetfulness typical of age." Mary Helen felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. Dr. Mitchell was the doctor Francis had insisted she visit for a routine checkup. During the consultation, he had asked strange questions about memory orientation. She had answered naturally without suspecting anything. "With this report and a few more documents, we can get guardianship," continued the unfamiliar voice. "Then you can make all the property decisions for her." "I don't know if I'm comfortable with this," David murmured. "David, your mother has a house worth $2 million plus investments she doesn't even know she has," said Francis. "She's old, alone, can be fooled by anyone. We are protecting her. And protecting our future," added the unfamiliar voice with a laugh that froze Mary Helen's blood. With her heart racing, she silently went up to the terrace. The pieces of the puzzle fit together in a terrifying way. The insistence that she move to a smaller space, the gradual removal of her belongings, the isolation, the changing of the locks. It was all part of a plan to have her considered incapable of taking care of herself. That night, she pretended to sleep when she heard footsteps in the garden. From the small window of the terrace, she saw David and Francis walking through the space she loved so much, holding plants and measuring spaces. "This would be perfect for the pool," Francis was saying, "and there we can make a deck." "I don't know if she'll like losing the garden," David replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "David, when we have guardianship, she won't have an opinion about anything. It will be better for her, too. No responsibilities, no worries." The next day, when David and Francis left for work, Mary Helen went down to the basement looking for the boxes with the objects they had stored for her. Many had disappeared. Among those that remained, she found one she didn't recognize, a shoebox with Anthony's handwriting on the side. For Mary Helen, important. With trembling hands, she opened the box. Inside, a letter in his careful handwriting. "My dear Mary Helen, if you're reading this, it's because something has happened to me, and you needed to look for important documents. I was always discreet about our finances, because I wanted you to live without worries, but it's time for you to know everything. Besides the house, we have investments in the central bank worth $800,000, an account at Bank of America of $300,000, and the beach house in Key West that I bought as a surprise and never told you about. All the documents are in this box. Use these resources as you see fit, but never allow anyone to make you feel dependent or diminished. You are stronger and more capable than you imagine. I love you forever, Anthony." Mary Helen had to sit on the basement floor to catch her breath. Anthony had left her a much larger estate than she had imagined, and David, her own son, was trying to take everything from her through a legal farce. Still in the box, she found bank statements from the last few months. There were regular withdrawals she hadn't made. Someone was using her information to withdraw money. The last statement showed an attempted transfer of $100,000 that had been blocked by the bank. With the evidence in hand, Mary Helen went up to the terrace and called Dr. Robert. "Doctor, I need to see you urgently, and I'm sure now that I'm not exaggerating." On the phone, Dr. Robert listened to her in silence. When she finished telling him everything, including the conversations she had overheard, he sighed deeply. "Mary Helen, this is very serious. It's attempted fraud and embezzlement. Do you want me to take legal measures?" "I do. But first, I want to confront them. I want to look into my son's eyes and hear from his mouth why he did this to me." That night, Mary Helen couldn't sleep. She looked at the ceiling of the terrace, so different from the ceiling of her room, where she had spent decades beside Anthony. She thought about the conversation she would have with David, the pain she felt not only from the betrayal, but from discovering that her only son considered her an obstacle to be removed. But along with the pain, something grew that she hadn't felt in a long time. A clean anger, an indignation that made her feel more alive than she had felt since Anthony left. They had underestimated her fighting capacity. It was time to show that Mary Helen was still very far from being the confused and defenseless old woman they were trying to create on paper. Mary Helen chose a Thursday night to confront them. David and Francis were preparing another of their elegant dinners when she came down from the terrace carrying a folder with documents. "Mom, you should let us know when you're coming down," said Francis with poorly disguised irritation. "We're expecting important guests." "I know you are," Mary Helen replied calmly. "And that's exactly why I chose today." Something in her tone made David look up from the wine he was opening. There was a firmness there that he hadn't heard in a long time. "What folder is that, Mom?" "They're very interesting documents, son. Bank statements, for example." Mary Helen opened the folder on the table set with fine china. "Did you know that someone has been making withdrawals from my account for months?" The silence that followed was dense. Francis stopped arranging the flowers and David left the corkscrew on the table. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about 14 withdrawals of $5,000 each. I'm talking about an attempted transfer of $100,000 that was blocked by the bank." Mary Helen spread the statements on the table. "I'm talking about a false medical report stating that I have mental problems." Francis tried to react. "Aunt, you're confusing things." "I'm not confusing anything," Mary Helen's voice echoed through the room, with an authority that made both of them fall silent. "I heard you talking with the lawyer. I heard about the guardianship, about the false reports, about transforming my garden into a swimming pool, when you managed to declare me incapable." David was pale. "Mom, I can explain. Can you explain how my own son tried to rob me? How you isolated me on the terrace, changed the locks of my own house, made me ring the doorbell to enter what is mine?" The tears finally came, but they weren't tears of weakness. They were tears of righteous anger, of an indignation that burned like a purifying fire. "You thought I was a helpless old woman who could be manipulated and discarded. You thought I wouldn't notice that I would passively accept being pushed into invisibility. Mom, we just wanted to take care of you." "Lie!" Mary Helen hit the table with her hand, making the glasses tinkle. "You wanted my assets. You wanted to consider me incapable so you could do whatever you wanted with what your father and I built over a lifetime. The doorbell rang. The guests had arrived. "Go answer it," said Mary Helen. "I insist they hear this too." "Mom, please. Go answer, or I will." David went to open the door with shaky legs. He returned accompanied by 3 well-dressed couples, clearly important clients. All seemed surprised to find Mary Helen standing in the dining room, surrounded by papers. "Good evening," she greeted them politely. "I apologize for interrupting your dinner, but I discovered that my son and daughter-in-law are trying to defraud me, and I thought everyone should know." The embarrassment was immediate. Frances tried to control the situation. "Sorry, everyone. David's mother has been a bit confused." "Confused?" Mary Helen laughed bitterly. "I'll show you who's confused." And she began to read excerpts from the bank statements, to explain about the false reports, about how she had been isolated on the terrace of her own house. The guests looked at each other uncomfortably. One of them muttered something about coming back another day, and they all began to say goodbye quickly, leaving David and Frances alone with Mary Helen. "There," she said when the door closed. "Now they know what kind of people you are." "Mum, you destroyed our professional reputation," said David, and there were tears in his eyes. "I destroyed it? David, you tried to rob me, declare me crazy to take my assets." "It wasn't robbery, it was protection. You're alone, vulnerable." "I was alone because I chose to accept you here. I was vulnerable because I trusted my own son." Mary Helen gathered the papers and put them back in the folder. "You have 1 month to leave my house." 1 month? Frances found her voice again. "You can't do this." "I can and I am. This house is mine. You altered my life without my consent, isolated me, tried to rob me. You have 1 month. And if we don't leave, then it will be the justice system who will resolve it. I have here the proof of embezzlement, document falsification, attempted fraud." Mary Helen showed the folder. "My lawyer is already preparing the complaints. You choose, leave willingly in 1 month or leave the hard way when the police come to get you." David dropped into a chair. "Mom, how did we get to this point?" "We got here because you forgot who I am, son. You forgot that I've lived 72 years, raised you, built this house, survived the departure of the man I loved. You completely underestimated me." Frances tried one last card. "Aunt, we can talk, reach an agreement." "The agreement is simple. You leave, return all the money you took from my accounts, and I won't report you. For now." That night, Mary Helen slept on the terrace for the last time. The next day, she began moving back to her room. Each piece of furniture she put back in place was a victory. Each recovered object was an affirmation of her existence. David and Frances met the deadline, but the last days were tense. David tried several times to talk to his mother, ask for forgiveness, explain himself, but Mary Helen was implacable. "You didn't just try to steal money from me, son. You tried to steal my dignity, my autonomy, my history." After they left, the house was silent again, but it was a different silence from what she had known before. It was no longer the silence of loneliness, but the silence of peace. With Dr. Roberts' help, she recovered all the money from the investments Anthony had left. She discovered she was richer than she had ever imagined, but more important than that, she discovered she was stronger than she had ever known. She renovated the house, but this time her way. She transformed the terrace into a painting studio, something she had always wanted to do and never had time for. She rekindled old friendships, made new friends in an art course, started hosting people at home again. 3 months after David and Frances left, Christine found her in the garden, painting the roses on a canvas. "How are you feeling, Mary?" "You know, Chris, I feel more alive now than I've felt since Anthony left. I discovered there's a difference between being alone and being abandoned. Now I'm alone by choice, not by circumstance." David tried to re-establish contact several times. He sent letters asking for forgiveness, called crying. Mary Helen received him with politeness but coldness. The wound was too deep to heal quickly. But 6 months later, when she found out she would be a grandmother, something moved in her heart. Not complete forgiveness, but a door left ajar for the possibility of reconstruction. "If you want to have a relationship with me and your son," she said on the phone, "it will have to be on my terms. You'll have to go to therapy, understand what you did, and prove that you've truly changed." David accepted. The process was long, painful, but gradual. Frances never set foot in Mary Helen's house again, But David, little by little, reconquered a space in his mother's life. On her 73rd birthday, Mary Helen organized a party in the garden she loved so much. New and old friends gathered among the roses she continued to care for with affection. During the party, she went up to her studio and contemplated the view that was fully hers again. She thought of Anthony. How proud he would be to see her so strong, so fulfilled. She had learned that courage can emerge at any age, that it's never too late to start over, to defend yourself, to reinvent yourself. Her most important story, after all, had begun at the exact moment they tried to erase her. And she, in response, reignited her own existence with an intensity she didn't know she possessed. At 73, Mary Helen wasn't just a survivor. She was a woman who had been reborn through the strength of her own dignity. The end of the story. Dear listeners, we hope that Mary Helen's story has deeply touched your hearts. This narrative reminds us that courage has no age and that we should never allow others to define our worth or our capacity. To continue this emotional journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about overcoming and human dignity. Find it here by clicking on the left. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on the video. Every day we bring unique narratives that explore the complexity and beauty of life. Don't miss our upcoming content and tell us in the comments, have you ever been in situations where you needed to fight for your dignity? We await you in the comments to share your own stories of courage.